The letter
The
sat
moment
on
we've
Lucian
waited for is
Ashford's
here.
desk like
I
an
know.
accusation.
It changes everything.
340
We face it together.
years of existence, and he still needed someone else to write his words for him. He traced the elegant script with fingers that had held swords in forgotten wars, had signed treaties he couldn't read, had touched the face of a dying woman while ancient medical texts sat useless and indecipherable on the shelf beside her bed. Eleanor, 50 years gone, and the shame still tasted fresh as blood. The throne room of Ashford Castle stretched vast and cold around him. Stone walls thick enough to withstand cannon fire, tapestries woven before America was born, candles burning in sconces that had witnessed 3 centuries of his rule, all of it testament to power, none of it testament to knowledge. Raven Shadowmere had written the letter, of course. Raven, who had been with him for 280 years, who knew every secret Lucian carried like stones in his chest. The vampire matchmaking service required correspondence, required words on paper, required the one thing Lucian Ashford, vampire king of the Ashford territory, could not provide himself. Plain, the letter said. Quiet, unobtrusive. Someone who would not ask questions he couldn't answer, who would not notice the careful way he avoided written documents, who would not see through 340 years of elaborate deception to the truth underneath. He was illiterate, had been since 1536, when a battlefield transformation had frozen him at 24, a peasant boy who'd never learned his letters, who would now never learn them. The vampire who made him had died in the same battle. No mentor, no guide, just eternal life and eternal ignorance, bound together like a curse. The castle doors opened with a sound like breaking bones. Lucian looked up. The autumn sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky the color of old blood. A carriage had arrived in the courtyard. He could hear the horses stamping, could smell the dust of 3 days' travel, could sense the single human heartbeat descending the steps. He stood, straightened the black coat that had been tailored in London 40 years ago, ran a hand through dark hair that would never gray, never thin, never change, prepared himself to meet the woman who would ask nothing of him, demand nothing from him, see nothing in him but what he chose to show. The woman who walked into his throne room was not plain. She was striking in the way a storm is striking. Auburn hair that caught the candlelight and held it. Gray-green eyes that assessed the vast chamber with the analytical precision of a scholar examining ancient ruins. She wore a traveling dress the color of deep wine, dust-stained from the journey, but well-made. Her hands were bare, no gloves. He could see ink stains on her fingers. Lucian's dead heart, which had not beat in 340 years, seemed to lurch in his chest. No, the word came out harsher than he intended. You're not what I requested. The woman stopped 10 feet from the dais where his throne sat. She didn't curtsy, didn't lower her eyes, just looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. I'm Thalia Corwin, she said. Her voice was lower than he expected, steady. And you requested someone who wouldn't trouble you, someone who wouldn't ask questions, someone who would stay in the shadows and let you maintain whatever fiction you built here. Yes. He descended the steps slowly. Vampires could move faster than human eyes could follow, but he'd learned centuries ago that unnatural speed unsettled people. And you are clearly none of those things. No, Thalia agreed, I'm not. She reached into the satchel at her side and pulled out 3 letters. The paper was worn at the edges, as though she'd read them many times. She laid them on the table beside his throne with careful precision. The first letter, she said, pointing to the one on the left, has shaky handwriting, large letters. The spelling is creative, quiet instead of quiet, need instead of need. The kind of mistakes someone makes when they're copying shapes they don't fully understand. Lucian went very still. The second and third letters, Thalia continued, her finger moving across the row, are in completely different handwriting. Elegant, educated. Someone else wrote these for you, didn't they? The silence in the throne room was absolute. Somewhere in the depths of the castle, Lucian could hear water dripping, could hear the night wind beginning to rise, could hear his entire carefully constructed world starting to crack. The matchmaking service, he said slowly, was supposed to send someone who wouldn't notice things like that. They sent someone who pays attention. Talia picked up the first letter, the one he'd labored over for 4 hours, alone in his study, forming each letter like a child. Like the child he'd been when mortality ended and learning stopped. This letter is the reason I came, not the polished ones, this one. Why? She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Lucian felt seen in a way he hadn't experienced since Eleanor died with his name on her lips and medicine he couldn't read in his hands. Because it was honest, Thalia said simply, badly spelled and awkwardly phrased, but honest. You didn't promise me anything. You didn't sell me a fantasy. You just told the truth about what you needed. She paused. Even if you couldn't tell the whole truth about why. Lucian should have sent her away, should have called for the carriage to be prepared, should have written her a bank draft, generous enough to assuage his conscience, and watched her disappear back down the mountain road. Should have requested someone else, someone truly plain, someone who wouldn't look at him like she could see straight through 340 years of careful performance to the fear underneath. Instead, he heard himself say, 1 month. Thalia's eyebrows rose. A trial period, Lucian continued. The words were coming from somewhere he didn't quite recognize, some part of himself he'd buried with Eleanor. You work here. See what the life entails. At the end of 30 days, if you wish to leave, you leave. No questions, no obligations. And if I wish to stay? Then we discuss terms. Thalia studied him for a long moment. Then she extended her hand. Agreed. He took it. Her skin was warm against his perpetual cold. The ink stains on her fingers were from a journal, he realized, from words she'd written herself, from a freedom he'd never known. Your chambers are in the East Wing, he said, releasing her hand before the contact could stretch into something uncomfortable. Raven will show you. We keep human hours here mostly. Dinner is at 8. Human hours, Thalia repeated. There was something in her tone. Not fear, curiosity. Then the rumors are true. You're a vampire. Lucian smiled. It was not a kind expression. Did you think it was metaphor? I thought it was possibility. She didn't flinch from his smile, from the slight elongation of canines that came with the expression. My uncle was a scholar of the occult. He taught me to approach legends as potential truth rather than definite fiction. More useful that way. Your uncle sounds like a dangerous man. He was a brilliant man who died alone because people feared his knowledge. Thalia picked up her satchel. I learned from him that being brilliant and being alone often go together. I'm tired of both. She walked toward the door where Raven was waiting, a silent shadow in the corridor. Then she paused and looked back. For what it's worth, she said, I don't care that you can't read. The words hit him like a physical blow. I care that you've spent however many years hiding it, Talia continued. I care that someone who's clearly intelligent enough to rule a vampire territory feels ashamed of something that's just information. Skills can be learned, King Ashford. The question is whether you want to learn them. She left before he could respond. The door closed behind her with a soft sound that echoed in the vast chamber like a shout. Lucian stood alone in his throne room, surrounded by centuries of accumulated power, and felt more exposed than he had since the night he died. The first week, Lucian avoided her. It was cowardice, and he knew it. 340 years old, powerful enough to tear a full-grown man apart with his bare hands, fast enough to move between shadows like smoke, and he was hiding from a 29-year-old human woman with ink-stained fingers and eyes that saw too much. He assigned her to the library. It was make work, and they both knew it. Organizing texts that had been organized 100 times before. Cataloging books that were already cataloged. Anything to keep her occupied and away from him while he figured out what to do with a woman who'd looked at his deepest shame and called it information. But he watched her. The castle had been built with secrets in mind, hidden passages threaded through the walls like veins. He could move through them unseen, could observe without being observed. It was how he'd survived this long. Knowledge was power, and the knowledge of what people did when they thought they were alone was the most valuable kind. Thalia approached the library like a general approaches a battlefield, strategic, methodical. She spent the first day simply walking the perimeter, trailing her fingers along spines, pulling books at random, examining them with that same analytical intensity she turned on him in the throne room. The second day, she started organizing, not by the system Raven had used for 2 centuries, by something else. Lucian watched from behind a hidden panel as she created new categories, new groupings. She moved the medical text together, the historical volumes, the linguistic studies, the ancient grimoires. There were 7 of them, massive volumes bound in leather that might have been human skin, might have been something worse. They sat on a shelf behind iron chains that hadn't been opened in 300 years. Vampire magic hummed around them, a low vibration that made the air thick. Thalia stood in front of them for an hour on the 3rd day, just stood there staring. Then she reached out and touched the chain. The magic didn't hurt her. It should have. The protection spells were designed to burn any hand that touched them without the proper authorization. But Talia's fingers brushed the iron, and the magic simply recognized her. Lucian could see the shimmer in the air, the way the spell tested her and found her acceptable. She was a scholar. True scholars were rare among humans. Born with an innate understanding of written language, an ability to parse meaning from symbols that others found impenetrable. Vampire text responded to them, recognized them, allowed them access that was denied to everyone else. Eleanor had been a scholar. It was how she'd been able to help him in the early years, how she'd read the treaties and laws and medical texts while he memorized her words and pretended they were his own thoughts. How she died reading desperately through plague cures while the fever took her and he stood uselessly by, unable to help, unable to even understand the words that might have saved her. Thalia pulled her hand back from the chain without opening it. She stood there for another moment, then turned away and went back to organizing the mundane books, the human books, the ones that held no power and no danger. Lucian exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. On the 5th night, he woke to wrongness. Vampires didn't sleep the way humans did. They entered a state of torpor, a stillness so profound it mimicked death. But ancient vampires, ones with centuries of practice, could control it, could wake when needed, could sense threats even in the darkest hours. The threat now was inside him. Blood fever. He recognized it instantly, though he hadn't experienced it in 50 years. The last time had been after Eleanor's death, when he'd gone months refusing to feed, punishing himself with starvation until his body rebelled. The disease started with heat. Vampires ran cold, always cold, bodies frozen at the temperature of death. But blood fever burned. It felt like being consumed from the inside, like every vein was full of molten metal instead of stolen blood. Then came the weakness. Vampires were strong, inhumanly strong, but blood fever stripped that away, made them mortal again, made them vulnerable. Then came the madness. Lucian dragged himself from his bed. His chambers were in the castle's oldest wing, surrounded by stone that had stood since the 13th century. The floor was cold under his bare feet. He could feel his body starting to shake. He needed blood, fresh blood from a compatible source. But more than that, he needed the cure ritual, the specific incantation that would purge the fever before it progressed to the stage where he'd lose control, where the hunger would drive him to kill whoever was closest. The medical grimoire, 5th shelf in the library, he knew because Eleanor had shown him once, had pointed to the exact spot, had made him memorize the location in case this ever happened again. But Eleanor was gone. Raven was in Helena, negotiating with the human town council about boundary treaties. The blood servants were all asleep in their quarters, and waking them would risk exposure if the fever had already progressed too far. Lucian made it halfway down the corridor before his legs gave out. He collapsed against the stone wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor like a vagrant. Like the peasant boy he'd been before a battlefield changed everything. His vision was starting to blur at the edges, red creeping in, the hunger rising. Footsteps, light, human, coming closer. He tried to stand, couldn't. Tried to call out a warning, the words wouldn't form. Thalia appeared around the corner. She was carrying a candle, wearing a nightdress and a shawl thrown over her shoulders. Her hair was loose, falling past her shoulders like a copper waterfall. She stopped when she saw him. King Ashford. No panic in her voice, just assessment. She set the candle down and knelt beside him. What's wrong? Blood fever. He forced the words out through teeth that were starting to lengthen. Library, medical grimoire, fifth shelf. I need the cure ritual. Talia's eyes widened. You need someone to read it, to perform it. Raven is gone. The red was getting worse. He could see her pulse in her throat, could hear her heartbeat like thunder. You need to run. Lock yourself in your chambers. When I lose control, how much time do we have? Minutes, maybe less. Talia stood. For a moment he thought she was going to run. Instead, she grabbed his arm and pulled. She was strong for a human woman, but not strong enough to lift a full-grown vampire, even one weakened by fever. Still, she tried. Can you walk if I support you? The library is too far. I won't make it. Then I'll bring the book here. She was already moving, already running down the corridor. Her bare feet made almost no sound on the stone. Don't die before I get back. Lucian leaned his head against the wall and tried to focus on anything other than the sound of her retreating heartbeat. Tried not to think about how easy it would be to hunt her through these corridors, how satisfying it would be to sink his teeth into that pulse point and drink until the fever passed, and she was empty. Eleanor's face flickered through his mind. Eleanor dying. Eleanor begging him to read the cure that might save her. Eleanor closing her eyes when he had to admit he couldn't. Not again. He would die here on this stone floor before he let that happen again. Thalia returned in less than 3 minutes. She was carrying one of the ancient grimoires, staggering slightly under its weight. The chains were open. The magic had let her pass. She dropped to her knees beside him and opened the book. The pages were vellum, inscribed in vampire runic script. Symbols that looked like they'd been written in blood and ash. Language that predated Latin, that predated most human civilizations. I can't read this, Talia said. Then, before despair could fully form, she tilted her head. No, wait, I can. It's similar to the Sumerian text my uncle showed me. The root structure is the same. Her finger traced the lines. Her lips moved silently. Lucian could see her parsing it out, could see the exact moment comprehension clicked into place. The ritual requires your blood mixed with mine, she said, and an incantation, 47 words in the old tongue. She looked at him. Do I have your permission? You're asking permission to save my life? I'm asking permission to perform blood magic with a vampire king who's currently losing control. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the fear underneath, could smell it on her skin. Consent matters even in emergencies. Yes, the word came out more growl than speech. Hurry. Talia pulled a small knife from somewhere in her shawl. Practical woman, he thought distantly, comes prepared. She cut her palm without hesitation, then held the blade out to him. He took it with shaking hands and cut his own palm. The blood that welled up was dark, almost black, corrupted by the fever. Thalia pressed her bleeding palm to his. The contact sent a shock through him that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with how long it had been since anyone had touched him with anything other than fear or formality. Then she started reading. The words were harsh, guttural, designed for throats that weren't quite human. But Thalia spoke them clearly, precisely, stumbling only once when she reached a compound phrase that required 3 syllables to be pronounced simultaneously. She worked it out, tried again, got it right. The magic responded. Lucian felt it like ice water through his veins. The fever screamed in protest, burning hotter for a moment before the ritual's power crushed it. His vision cleared. The red receded. The inhuman hunger that had been rising like a tide pulled back to manageable levels. He slumped against the wall, suddenly exhausted in a way vampires rarely experienced. Thalia was breathing hard. The ritual had taken something from her too. Energy, life force, something that would take days to fully recover. "Did it work?" she asked. "Yes," his voice was rough. "You saved my life." "I read a book." She was wrapping her bleeding palm in the edge of her shawl. "That's all." "You read a book in a dead language that most scholars spend decades studying. You parsed an ancient vampire ritual in less than 3 minutes. You performed blood magic." He looked at her, really looked. "Who are you?" "Thalia Corwin. You already know that." "You're a scholar." "My uncle thought so. He taught me languages: Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, some Sumerian. He believed all written language shared common roots, that if you understood the patterns, you could decode almost anything." She gestured to the grimoire. Apparently he was right. Lucian tried to stand, failed. Thalia slipped under his arm without being asked, supporting him with her whole body. She was warm against his cold skin, alive in a way he'd forgotten life could be. "Can you make it back to your chambers?" she asked. "Eventually. Then we'll take it slow." They moved through the dark corridors, Lucian leaning on a human woman who'd been in his castle less than a week, who'd discovered his secret, who'd saved his life with knowledge he should have possessed himself, but didn't. When they reached his door, Thalia helped him inside and onto the edge of his bed. Then she stood there, uncertain for the first time since he'd met her. "The grimoires," Lucian said quietly. "You opened them. The magic let you." "It did. They're sealed, have been for 300 years. Sealed because—" He stopped. The admission was like pulling teeth. "Because I can't read them. A vampire king who can't access the knowledge of his own people. So I locked them away where no one would question why they were never consulted." Thalia sat down on the chair across from his bed. Not close, but not leaving either. 340 years, she said. It wasn't a question. She'd done the math. "That's how long you've been hiding this." "I was a peasant boy, transformed at 24, never learned my letters, never had the chance." The words kept coming now that he'd started, like a wound lanced. "And vampires don't learn the way humans do. Our minds freeze. What we knew at the moment of transformation is what we carry forward. Everything else is just memory, not true learning." "That's not entirely true." Thalia leaned forward. "Memory is learning. You've learned politics, diplomacy, how to rule. You just haven't learned literacy because no one's taught you in a way that works with how your mind functions now. You think you could teach a 340-year-old vampire to read? I think I could teach anyone who wants to learn." She smiled slightly. "The question is whether you want to, or whether you'd rather keep hiding." Before he could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed in the corridor. Multiple sets, moving fast. The heavy tread of vampires who weren't bothering to mask their approach. Lucian stood, the last of the fever's weakness falling away as threat sharpened his senses. Thalia stood too, moving instinctively to his side. The door opened without courtesy of a knock. Mordecai Cross filled the doorway. 600 years old, and it showed in every line of his gaunt face, every inch of his impossible stillness. Behind him stood 3 other members of the Elder Council, their expressions carved from stone. Lucian Ashford, Mordecai's voice was like gravel dragged over ice. We need to speak. Now. It's 4 in the morning. The council does not keep mortal hours. Mordecai's eyes moved to Thalia, took in her nightdress and bare feet, the blood-stained shawl wrapped around her hand. Send your human away. This is vampire business. She stays. The words came out before Lucian could think them through. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of Lady Corwin. Mordecai's smile was a terrible thing. Very well. The council has reviewed your tenure as king. 340 years of rule. 340 years during which you have failed to perform the sacred reading. Lucian's blood went cold for reasons that had nothing to do with fever. The founder's grimoire, Mordecai continued, contains the oath of sovereignty. Every vampire king must read it aloud and recite it from memory every 100 years. It is law. It is tradition. It is requirement. He paused. You have missed 3 cycles. The council demands to know why. Silence filled the chamber. Lucian could feel Thalia's eyes on him, could feel the weight of 340 years of deception pressing down like a physical force. I will perform the reading, he said carefully. Name your time. We name it now, tonight, in front of the full council. Mordecai's smile widened. Unless you have some reason you cannot comply? It was a trap, a beautiful, perfect trap. If Lucian refused, he admitted weakness. If he agreed, he revealed his secret in front of the entire vampire power structure. Either way, Mordecai won. Lucian started. He delegates the reading to me. Every head turned toward Thalia. She stood straight, chin raised, meeting Mordecai's gaze without flinching. Ancient law, she continued, states that a king may delegate any sacred duty to his consort if she is a recognized scholar. I am both. Therefore, I will perform the reading in King Ashford's name. Mordecai's expression flickered. Surprise. Then, calculation. You claim scholar status? The grimoires recognize me. The magic allowed me access. That is the traditional test, is it not? It is. Mordecai looked at Lucian. And you claim her as consort after less than a week? The claiming is not complete, Lucian said. The lie came easily after so many centuries of them. But the intent is declared. Lady Corwin acts with my authority. Mordecai was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Very well, the reading may be delegated, but the council is not satisfied with this. We have concerns about your capacity to rule, King Ashford, about your understanding of the ancient laws, about your worthiness to hold power. What are you suggesting? A trial of sovereignty, 30 days from tonight. Mordecai's voice was formal now, official. You will prove your knowledge of vampire law and magic. You will read and translate ancient texts. You will perform rituals from the grimoires. You will demonstrate that you are worthy to rule. He leaned forward. Or you will abdicate. The words hung in the air like poison. The council has voted, Mordecai continued. 20 votes in favor, 3 opposed. The trial is law. You have 30 days to prepare. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and King Ashford, no delegation this time. You will perform the task yourself, or prove yourself unfit. They left. The door closed. The silence that remained was deafening. Lucian sank back onto the bed. 30 days. 30 days to learn what he should have learned 340 years ago. 30 days to master texts that vampires spent decades studying. 30 days to become what he'd always pretended to be. Impossible. How long can you read at one time? Thalia's voice cut through his despair. Before you tire? What? How long? An hour? 2? She was already moving toward the door. I'll need to know your limitations so we can structure the lessons properly. You want to teach me in 30 days. I want to try. She looked back at him. Unless you'd prefer to abdicate to Mordecai, he seems charming. Despite everything, Lucian almost smiled. He's been trying to take my throne for 200 years. Then let's not give it to him. Thalia pulled open the door. I'll meet you in the library tomorrow at sunset. Bring your pride, because we're going to have to kill it before we can begin. She left. Lucian sat alone in his chambers as dawn began to lighten the sky outside his windows. 30 days until he either proved himself or lost everything. But for the first time in 340 years, the challenge ahead felt less like certain doom and more like possibility. In the corridor outside, hidden in shadows that even vampire eyes would miss, Silas Winter watched Thalia return to her chambers. Then he turned and melted into the darkness, already composing the message he would send to Mordecai. The pieces were moving exactly as the elder had planned. The first lesson began the following night at sunset. Lucian found Thalia in the library already, 3 candles burning on the long oak table, their flames reflected in the dark windows. She'd moved the furniture, the heavy reading chairs pushed to the walls, the table cleared of everything except a single book, not one of the ancient grimoires, something smaller, simpler, a child's primer. The humiliation of it struck him like a physical blow. 340 years old, ruler of 200 vampires in a territory that stretched across 3 mountain ranges. And here he stood, staring at a book designed for human children, learning their first letters. Sit down, Thalia said. No preamble, no softness to cushion the command. He sat. She opened the book. The pages were worn soft with use. The illustrations faded but still clear. An apple, a bird, a cat. This was mine, she said. My uncle gave it to me when I was 4. I learned to read from these pages. She looked at him. There's no shame in starting at the beginning. There's only shame in refusing to start at all. I have 30 days. Then we don't waste time on pride. She turned the book toward him. Tell me what you see. Lucian looked at the page. Letters, symbols. They might as well have been scratches made by claws for all the meaning they held. Nothing, he said. I see nothing. You see shapes. Everyone sees shapes. The question is teaching your mind to connect those shapes to sounds, and those sounds to meaning. Thalia pulled out a piece of charcoal and paper. We'll start with your name. Lucian. She wrote each letter slowly. Her hand moved with the confidence of someone who'd spent a lifetime writing, who'd never questioned her right to words. This first one is L. It makes the sound at the beginning of light or lion. She tapped the letter. Say it. L. Good. This one is U, like the sound in under or umbra. They worked through his name letter by letter, sound by sound. It took an hour for him to recognize all 6 letters. Another hour to string them together into something that resembled the word he'd heard spoken thousands of times, but never seen written. When he finally read it, his own name in his own voice, from symbols on a page, something cracked open in his chest. Thalia smiled, not triumphant, just satisfied. Again. They worked until dawn. 6 hours of letters and sounds and words that wouldn't stay in his mind, no matter how many times he repeated them. His brain kept sliding off them like water off stone. 340 years of not learning had created pathways that resisted every attempt at change. When the first light touched the windows, Thalia closed the primer. That's enough for tonight. I only learned my name. You learned 6 letters, 6 more than you knew yesterday. She stood, stretching muscles gone stiff from sitting. This isn't a sprint, King Ashford. It's a siege. We take ground inch by inch until we hold the fortress. He wanted to argue, wanted to throw the book across the room and rage at the injustice of a mind that could master battle strategy and political maneuvering, but couldn't grasp simple letters. Wanted to give up before the inevitable failure could hurt worse than it already did. Instead, he said, tomorrow night, same time. Thalia paused at the door. Why did you never try to learn before? In 340 years, surely someone could have taught you. Eleanor, he didn't say. Eleanor tried, but she died before we could finish. and I couldn't bear to let anyone else see the truth of it. I was afraid, he said instead. The truth, if not the whole truth. Afraid of failing, afraid of anyone knowing. Fear is easier than hope. Fear keeps you alive, Thalia said quietly. Hope makes you want to be alive. There's a difference. She left. Lucian sat alone in the library as dawn turned the mountains gold and red. The primer lay open on the table, his name written in Thalia's careful hand. Lucian. 6 letters. A beginning. The second week was harder than the first. Lucian's mind fought him at every turn. Letters that made sense one night became incomprehensible the next. Words he'd mastered yesterday dissolved into meaningless shapes today. The vampire brain, frozen at the moment of transformation, resisted new patterns with a stubbornness that felt like physical pain. 3 times he tried to quit. 3 times Thalia refused to let him. Read it again, she said on the 9th night, when frustration had him ready to tear the pages apart with his bare hands. I can't. You can't yet. There's a difference. She pushed the book back toward him. Again. The sentence was simple. 5 words. The cat sat on the mat. He'd read it perfectly the night before. Tonight the letters swam and shifted like they were alive, refusing to hold still long enough for meaning to form. The sea. He stopped, started over. The cat sat. The third word defeated him. He stared at it until his eyes burned. I don't know. Sound it out. What's the first letter? O. Good. What sound does it make? Ah. Oh. He closed his eyes. I don't know. Yes, you do. You learned this 4 nights ago. Her voice was patient but firm. The sound is ah. Now the next letter. N. Ah, N. On. The word clicked. On. The cat sat on the mat. Yes. No praise, no celebration, just acknowledgement and then, again, 5 times. They worked until his voice was hoarse from reading aloud, until the candles burned low and the night deepened toward dawn, until the simple primer sentences began to stick in his memory, not just as sounds, but as understood meaning. On the 14th night, Thalia brought a different book, not a primer, a collection of folk tales. The print was larger than normal text, the language simple, but it was real writing, adult writing. Read me the first paragraph, she said. Lucian looked at the page. The letters were smaller, closer together. His hard-won progress felt suddenly insufficient, but he started, slowly, stumbling over words he didn't know, sounding them out the way she'd taught him. It took him 20 minutes to read 4 sentences, but he read them. Thalia leaned back in her chair, something like wonder crossing her face. Do you understand what just happened? I read badly. You read. 2 weeks ago, you couldn't recognize your own name. Tonight, you read 4 sentences in a book designed for adult humans. She smiled. That's extraordinary progress. I'll never be ready in time. The trial requires reading ancient grimoires, performing rituals from texts written in languages that predate Latin. I'm reading children's stories at the pace of continental drift. Ancient vampire texts aren't that different from what you're learning now. Same principles. Symbols representing sounds, sounds forming words, words creating meaning. She pulled out one of the grimoires, the smallest one, opened it to a random page. Look, these symbols seem complex, but they follow patterns. See this one? It's similar to the runic letter for B. And this one? It's a compound of 2 sounds we've already practiced. She was right. He could see it now, with 2 weeks of training. Could see the underlying structure that connected the simple primer to the ancient texts. It was still impossibly far away, but it was no longer invisible. How did you learn to see patterns like this? He asked. My uncle. He believed all written language descended from a common ancestor, proto-writing that existed before recorded history. If you understood the root patterns, you could decode anything. Thalia traced the symbols on the grimoire page. He spent 30 years proving his theory. Academic circles called him a crackpot, but he was right. Where is he now? Dead, 5 years ago. His own colleagues wouldn't attend his funeral because associating with him might damage their reputations. Her voice was flat, factual, but pain lived underneath. He died believing he'd wasted his life on theories no one would ever validate. But you validated them. Too late for him to know it. She closed the grimoire. That's why I understand. My uncle carried something heavy every day. The weight of being brilliant in a way the world refused to recognize. Of having knowledge that terrified people because it challenged their comfortable certainties. She looked at him then, really looked, and Lucian felt that same sense of being seen that had struck him the first night. You're not the only one who spent a lifetime hiding, Thalia said quietly. I just hide different things. The library was silent except for the soft crackle of candle flames. Outside, an owl called in the darkness. A night wind moved through the pine trees that surrounded the castle. What are you hiding? Lucian asked. That I'm lonely. That I'm tired of being valued for my face instead of my mind. That I came here because a barely literate letter from a vampire king was the most honest thing any man has ever said to me. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm hiding that I'm desperate enough to bet everything on 30 days with a stranger because staying where I was felt like dying slowly. The confession hung between them like something tangible. Lucian wanted to reach across the table, wanted to take her ink-stained hand and tell her he understood. That 340 years hadn't made loneliness easier. That power and immortality were poor substitutes for being known. Instead, he picked up the book of folktales. Read with me, he said. You read one sentence, I'll read the next. We'll take turns. Talia's smile changed, became real. They read together until dawn. Her voice smooth and confident, his voice halting and uncertain. The story unfolding between them in alternating rhythms. A fairy tale about a princess who learned to speak the language of birds and used their wisdom to save her kingdom. When they finished the last page, the sun was rising behind the mountains. Golden light flooded the library, turning the dust motes into floating gold. Same time tomorrow? Thalia asked. Every night until the trial. Lucian closed the book carefully. And Thalia? Yes? Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for not giving up on yourself. She gathered her books. That's the harder part. The third week, something shifted between them. It started small. Lucian began arriving at the library before Thalia, preparing the space, lighting the candles, selecting the texts they'd work on. Small gestures of partnership instead of student and teacher. Thalia brought food from the kitchens, bread and cheese and wine, things he couldn't eat but she could. She ate while he practiced writing, her presence making the work feel less like punishment and more like companionship. On the 18th night, he read an entire page from the ancient grimoire without help. The text was a historical account of a vampire battle from 600 years ago. The language was archaic, the syntax complex, but Lucian pushed through it, read every word, understood perhaps 70% of the meaning. When he finished, Thalia was staring at him. What? He asked. You just read vampire history that most scholars study for months before they can parse. You did it in one attempt. She shook her head. You realize you're learning faster than anyone expected? You don't lack ability, Lucian. You just needed the right teacher. It was the first time she'd used his name without the title. The sound of it in her voice made something warm unfurl in his chest. Something he hadn't felt since Eleanor. Something he'd thought died with her. Thalia, he said, testing her name the same way. Intimate, unguarded. Yes? Why are you really here? The truth, not the letter, not the arrangement. Why did you choose this? She was quiet for a long moment. Her fingers traced patterns on the table, unconscious writing of words only she could read. Because I was tired of being decoration, she said finally. Every man in Kansas saw my face and decided I was an ornament, something to put on display. And when I opened my mouth and had opinions, had knowledge, had a brain that worked, they lost interest. Or worse, they got angry, told me I was wasting my education, that I'd be prettier if I smiled more and thought less. Her voice was steady, but Lucian could hear the pain underneath. Years of it, a lifetime. I came here because your letter didn't promise me anything, didn't try to sell me a fantasy, just offered honesty. She looked up. And because a man who can't read but spent 4 hours writing a letter himself, making mistakes and trying anyway, that's someone who understands what it means to want something badly enough to look foolish in the pursuit. I don't think you could ever look foolish. You didn't see me at 17 trying to attend university lectures by pretending to be my male cousin. She smiled slightly. I got caught. They escorted me out. My uncle had to apologize to the dean for my inappropriate behavior. They feared your intelligence. They feared what I represented, a woman who wanted more than they were willing to give. Thalia stood, walked to the window. The moon was full outside, painting the mountain peaks silver. Do you know what the worst part is? Not the rejection, not the exclusion. It's the slow erosion of hope. Year after year of being told you're too much, or not enough, or wrong somehow in a way you can't fix because the problem isn't you. It's them, their fear, their smallness. Lucian moved to stand beside her, not touching, but close enough that she'd feel his presence. Eleanor told me once that the cruelest thing about immortality wasn't watching people die, he said. It was watching them live small lives when they were capable of so much more. Watching fear make them choose safety over significance. Was she afraid? Terrified, every day. But she chose to live with me anyway, knowing it would end, knowing she'd die and I'd continue. That took more courage than anything I've ever done in 340 years. You loved her. I did. He looked at Thalia's reflection in the window glass, auburn hair catching the candlelight, gray-green eyes reflecting the moon. I thought I'd never feel that again, thought that part of me died with her. Thalia turned to face him. They were close enough now that he could feel the warmth of her breath, could hear the slight catch in her heartbeat. And now? She asked. Now I'm starting to remember what hope feels like, and it's terrifying. She reached up, her hand cupped his face, thumb tracing the line of his jaw. The touch was gentle, deliberate, a question asked without words. He leaned into it, let himself feel the warmth of human skin against vampire cold, let himself want something other than survival. We have 12 days until the trial, Thalia said softly. 12 days until Mordecai tries to take everything from you. We shouldn't complicate this. You're right. I know I'm right. Neither of them moved. Thalia, he said, just her name. But it held everything. All the loneliness, all the hope, all the terrifying possibility of letting someone in again. She kissed him. It was gentle at first, testing, then deeper as he responded, his hands finding her waist, pulling her closer. She was warm and alive and real, in a way nothing had been real for 50 years. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Thalia pressed her forehead to his. This is a terrible idea, she whispered, catastrophically bad. We should stop. Absolutely. She kissed him again, longer this time, unhurried, a promise and a question and an answer all at once. When dawn came, they were sitting on the library floor, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. The books forgotten, the candles burned down to stubs. Tomorrow night, she said, we go back to work. The trial is too close. We can't afford distraction. Tomorrow night, he agreed. But tonight? Tonight we're allowed to be human, even if only one of us actually is. They sat in the growing light until the sun forced him to retreat to his windowless chambers, until Thalia had to return to her own rooms before the servants began their morning routines. But something had changed. Some wall had come down. And the work that followed over the next 11 days carried a new weight. They weren't just preparing for a trial anymore, they were fighting for a future that included both of them. On the 24th day, Raven Shadowmere returned to the castle. The vampire appeared in the library without warning, moving between shadows like smoke. Thalia jumped. Lucian, who'd sensed Raven's approach a full minute before arrival, stayed seated. "You're back early," Lucian said. "The council summoned me. They have concerns." Raven's dark eyes moved to the book spread across the table, the pages covered in Thalia's careful notation, the texts Lucian had been practicing. "You're actually doing it, learning to read." "Attempting to." "How far have you progressed?" Lucian picked up one of the ancient grimoires, opened to a random page, read aloud. The words came slowly but clearly. An invocation for protecting territory boundaries, complex syntax, archaic vocabulary. He made it through 3 paragraphs before stopping. Raven's expression was unreadable. "I've known you for 280 years. I never thought I'd see this." "Neither did I." "Can you pass the trial?" The question hung heavy. Lucian exchanged a glance with Thalia. She nodded slightly. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I can read now, better every night, but the trial requires translation, ritual performance, and solving complex legal disputes using ancient precedent. I have 6 days left. It might be enough, it might not." Raven moved closer to the table. His ancient fingers traced the edge of a grimoire. "There is another way." "What way?" "Blood transfer. I could give you my memories, my knowledge, everything I've learned in 280 years of studying these texts. You'd have instant access, complete understanding, more than enough to pass the trial." Thalia stood. "What would that cost you?" Raven smiled. It was a sad expression. "Torpor. The transfer would drain my life force. I'd sleep for 100 years, maybe longer." "No." Lucian's voice was flat, final. "I won't ask that of you." "You're not asking. I'm offering. You saved my life in 1823 when the hunters came. Let me return the favor." "By sacrificing a century of your existence?" "That's not a favor, Raven. That's martyrdom." "It's necessity. Mordecai will take the throne if you fail, and Mordecai will undo everything we've built. He'll go back to the old ways. Blood raids on human villages, forced servitude, war with the other territories." Raven's voice was urgent now. "You're not just fighting for yourself, Lucian. You're fighting for every human in this territory, for peace that took 3 centuries to build. That's worth 1 vampire's century of sleep." The offer was tempting. Lucian could feel it. The easy solution, the guarantee of victory. Just 1 blood transfer and all his struggles would end. He'd have the knowledge he needed, could face the trial with confidence instead of desperate hope. But the cost? "No," he said again. "I will not take the throne by using people anymore. I've spent 340 years having others do things I should do myself. Write my letters, read my texts, speak my words. If I take the throne through your sacrifice, I'm just continuing that pattern, just hiding behind someone else's ability." "This is different." "It's not," Lucian stood, "and you know it. The whole point of this trial is to prove I'm worthy to rule. Worthy not because I can manipulate others into covering my weaknesses, but because I can face my weaknesses and overcome them myself." He looked at Thalia. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Pride, maybe, or love, or both. "I appreciate the offer, old friend," Lucian said to Raven. "More than you know. But the answer is no. I do this myself, or I don't do it at all." Raven was silent for a long moment. Then he bowed. "As you wish, my king. I'll inform the council that I've returned and am available to witness the trial." He left as silently as he'd arrived. Thalia moved to Lucian's side. "That was the right choice," she said. "That was probably stupid. I just turned down a guaranteed victory." "You chose integrity over certainty. That's not stupid. That's leadership. She took his hand. 6 days, we make them count. The poison came on the 26th night. Talia was working at her desk in her chambers, making notes on the legal texts they'd review the next day. The tea she'd requested from the kitchens sat steaming beside her. She took a sip without thinking, started to write another line. The world tilted. She grabbed the desk edge as vertigo hit like a physical blow. The room spun. Her vision blurred at the edges, then began to darken. Not blackness, something worse. A creeping gray that ate at the world from the outside in. Her journal fell from nerveless fingers. She tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't support her. The door opened. Silas Winter stood in the doorway. His face was expressionless. "Nightshade venom," he said clinically. "Won't kill you, just blind you. Temporarily. 3 to 5 days should do it." Talia tried to scream. Nothing came out but a whisper. "Lord Mordecai's orders," Silas continued. "Can't have you helping King Ashford in the trial. This way you're alive. You just can't read, can't teach, can't do anything but sit in darkness while your vampire learns what it means to fail alone." The gray finished eating her vision. The last thing Thalia saw was Silas turning away, closing the door softly behind him. Then nothing. Complete and utter blindness. She collapsed. The floor was cold against her cheek. She could still hear, still feel, just couldn't see. Footsteps in the corridor, running, the door crashing open. "Thalia!" Lucian's voice, desperate, terrified. She felt him lift her, felt herself being carried, heard him shouting for Raven, for the medical supplies, for help. "I can't see," she managed to whisper. "Lucian, I can't see anything." "What happened? What did you take?" "Tea, from the kitchens. Silas was here. Said nightshade venom. Said 3 to 5 days." The trial was in 4 days. Lucian laid her on her bed. She felt him take her hand, felt the coldness of vampire fingers wrapped around her warm ones. "I'll find who did this," he said. "I'll make them pay. No." Talia squeezed his hand with what little strength she had left. "You'll study. You'll prepare. The trial is in 4 days and you can't afford distraction." "How can I prepare without you?" "The same way you've been preparing. You read, you practice, you push through." Her voice was fading, the venom pulling her toward unconscious darkness. "You've learned enough. You just have to believe it." "I can't do this alone." "You're not alone. I'm here. I just can't see for a while." She tried to smile, had no idea if she succeeded. "But I can still hear. So you read to me. Every night. You read the texts out loud and I'll listen. I'll correct you when you're wrong. We keep working." "Talia, promise me. Promise you won't give up." His hand tightened on hers. "I promise." The darkness took her then, but before it did, she heard him whisper something. 3 words that followed her down into unconsciousness. "I love you." The day of the trial arrived with cold autumn rain. The council chamber was carved into the mountain itself. Stone walls that had stood since before human civilization. Torches burning in iron sconces that predated the written word. 23 vampire elders seated in a semicircle, their faces impassive as death masks. Mordecai Cross sat at the center, 600 years old, and every one of them visible in the cruel lines of his face. Lucian entered alone. Thalia was in her chambers, still blind, but conscious enough to send him with a fierce whisper. "Show them what you can do." The chamber fell silent as he approached the center of the room, the space where defendants stood, where accused vampires faced judgment. "Lucian Ashford," Mordecai's voice echoed off stone. "You stand before the council to face the trial of sovereignty. 3 tests. Pass all 3 and you remain king. Fail any one and you abdicate." "I understand. Do you wish to make any statement before we begin?" Lucian looked at the assembled elders, faces he'd known for centuries, some allies, some enemies, all watching to see him fail. "Only this," he said. "I have ruled this territory for 340 years. I have kept the peace, maintained treaties with humans, built prosperity where there was poverty, created stability where there was chaos. I have done all this while carrying something I believed was a weakness." He paused. Let the words sink in. "I was wrong. Not about the weakness, about the hiding, about the fear, about believing that asking for help meant admitting defeat." He looked directly at Mordecai. "I am ready to face your trial, and I will face it as what I am, a vampire who can now read. Not perfectly, but adequate, and adequate is enough." Mordecai's smile was sharp as broken glass. "We shall see. First test, translation." 3 scrolls were brought forward, ancient, delicate, written in languages that predated Latin. "You will read each scroll aloud," Mordecai said, "then translate it into modern English. You have 1 hour." Lucian approached the first scroll, unrolled it carefully. The text was dense, cramped writing in vampire runic script. A legal document establishing territory boundaries from 800 years ago. He started to read, slowly, carefully, sounding out words he didn't immediately recognize, pausing to work through complex compound phrases. The first scroll took 20 minutes. His translation was halting but accurate. The second scroll was easier, a historical account written in a more modern dialect. 15 minutes. The third scroll was archaic, a dialect he'd only seen a few times in his studying with Thalia. He struggled, made mistakes, had to backtrack and try again. But he finished. 48 minutes total. Mordecai conferred quietly with the other elders, then nodded. Acceptable. Second test. Blood magic ritual. A circle was drawn on the stone floor in chalk mixed with ground bone. Symbols that hurt to look at directly. Power that made the air thick and hard to breathe. "You will perform the ritual of binding," Mordecai said, reading the incantation from the Crimson Grimoire. 53 lines, no mistakes. A single error and the magic will fail. The grimoire was brought forward, opened to the correct page. The text was written in red ink, or perhaps blood. With vampire artifacts, it was hard to tell the difference. Lucian stepped into the circle. The magic pressed against him immediately. Testing, tasting, deciding if he was worthy. He began to read. The words were harsh, guttural, designed for throats that had evolved past human. But he'd practiced this kind of reading with Thalia, had learned to shape the sounds correctly. Line by line, he moved through the incantation, his voice steady, his pronunciation clear. On line 37, he stumbled, a compound phrase that twisted in 3 directions at once. He caught himself, started the line over, got it right. Line 50, 51, 52, 53. The magic detonated. Blue-white light filled the circle. The symbols on the floor ignited, burning without heat. The ritual had recognized his reading, had accepted his authority. The light faded. Lucian stepped out of the circle. His hands were shaking. 2 tests passed, 1 to go. Final test, Mordecai said. His voice was tight now, angry. He'd expected Lucian to fail by now. Legal precedent, he laid out a case. Complex. 2 vampire nobles claiming the same hunting territory, both with legitimate deeds, both with ancient rights. A dispute that had no clear answer. You must consult the legal grimoires and render judgment based on ancient precedent, Mordecai said. You have 30 minutes. 4 grimoires were provided. Lucian opened the first one, started reading. The legal language was dense, archaic, filled with subclauses and exceptions and references to even older laws. But Thalia had taught him how to parse this, how to look for the root structure, the underlying principles. He found a relevant case from 600 years ago, read through it, moved to the second grimoire. 20 minutes in, he found what he needed, a precedent from 900 years ago, a case where two nobles claimed overlapping territory due to survey errors. The ruling had been clear. The noble who could prove continuous use of the land for 3 generations had superior claim. Lucian closed the books. "I have my judgment. Speak." He laid out his reasoning, cited the specific precedent, explained how it applied to the current case. His delivery wasn't eloquent, but it was accurate, complete, legally sound. When he finished, the chamber was silent. Mordecai's face was stone. "The council will deliberate." The elders huddled, whispered in voices too low even for Lucian's vampire hearing. 5 minutes passed, 10, then they separated, returned to their seats. Mordecai stood. "In the matter of the translation test, the council finds your performance acceptable." Lucian released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "In the matter of the ritual test, the council finds your performance acceptable." 2 down, 1 to go. "In the matter of the legal precedent test," Mordecai paused, drew out the moment. "The council finds your performance adequate." Relief crashed through Lucian like a wave. "However," Mordecai continued, and ice formed in Lucian's chest, "there is still the matter of how you came to acquire these skills in less than 30 days. The matter of Lady Corwin's convenient scholar abilities. The matter of whether this trial was undermined by outside assistance." "I learned to read," Lucian said flatly. "That was the point of the trial. You learned with help from a human woman who conveniently appeared in your castle weeks before the trial was announced. A woman who was poisoned, allegedly, to prevent her from helping you." Mordecai's smile was vicious. "I submit that Lady Corwin's poisoning was staged, a performance designed to generate sympathy, that her blindness is false, that she has been coaching you throughout the trial itself through some magical means." "That's absurd." "Is it? Prove she's actually blind. Bring her here. Let us examine her." Before Lucian could respond, a voice rang out from the back of the chamber. "No need." Every head turned. Silas Winter stood in the doorway. His face was pale, his hands shaking. "Lord Mordecai," Silas said, his voice cracked, "I must confess, the poisoning was real, and I was the one who administered it." The chamber erupted, vampires surging to their feet, voices raised in shock and anger. "Silence!" Mordecai's command cracked like a whip. He stared at Silas. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you ordered me to poison Lady Corwin. You gave me the nightshade venom. You told me to put it in her tea." Silas reached into his coat and pulled out a bundle of papers. "I have your letters, your instructions, proof of everything." He walked forward, laid the letters on the table in front of the council. "Why are you doing this?" Mordecai's voice was deadly quiet. "Because I watched Lady Corwin fight through 3 days of blindness and still help King Ashford prepare. I heard her in her chambers, listening as he read aloud, correcting his pronunciation even when she couldn't see the words. I watched a human woman display more courage and loyalty than I've shown in 200 years as a vampire." Silas looked at Lucian. "I don't want to be the creature who poisoned that woman and felt nothing. I want to be better than that, even if it cost me everything." Mordecai stood slowly. "You betray me. You betray the plan. You broke sacred law," Lucian interrupted. He moved to the grimoires, found the one he needed, opened to the page he'd memorized 3 days ago because Thalia had told him to study it. Article 12 of the Founder's Code. Any elder who harms the king's consort through poison, magic, or violence forfeits all titles and faces final death. He looked up, met Mordecai's eyes. "You ordered the poisoning of my consort. Article 12 applies. The penalty is execution." Mordecai laughed, harsh and bitter. "That law hasn't been invoked in 500 years. You can't possibly—" "I invoke it now." Lucian's voice was iron. "Elder Mordecai Cross, you are found guilty of conspiring to harm the king's consort. You are stripped of your titles, and you are sentenced to final death." The council chamber exploded into chaos, vampires shouting, some in support, some in protest, the ancient laws that govern them clashing with the political realities of the moment. But the law was clear, and Lucian had just used the very literacy Mordecai had tried to deny him to seal the elder's fate. "I am not finished," Lucian's voice cut through the noise. The chamber fell silent. "I have ruled this territory for 340 years. For most of that time, I ruled while carrying a burden I believe disqualified me from leadership. I am done with that, done with hiding." He looked at each elder in turn. "From this day forward, this territory has a new priority: education. I will establish a school, vampires and humans learning together. Anyone who wishes to learn to read, to write, to understand the ancient texts will have that opportunity." He paused. "And I invoke the right of consort claiming. Lady Thalia Corwin is hereby recognized as my official consort. She holds all rights and privileges of that position. Any who harm her, harm me. Any who dishonor her, dishonor this throne." He looked at Raven. "Execute the sentence on Mordecai Cross, then have the healers attend to Lady Corwin. I want the venom purged from her system by nightfall." Raven bowed. "As you command, my king." Lucian turned and walked from the chamber. Behind him, he could hear Mordecai beginning to scream, could hear the sound of justice finally being served. But he didn't look back. He was already moving toward Thalia's chambers, toward the woman who'd saved him, not by doing the work for him, but by teaching him to do it himself. The woman he loved. The woman who'd shown him that 340 years of burden could be overcome in 30 days of courage. The door to her chambers was open. She was sitting by the window, her face turned toward light she couldn't see. "Thalia." She turned toward his voice, smiled. "You passed. I can hear it in your voice. You passed." "I passed. I knew you would." He crossed the room, knelt beside her chair, took her hands in his. "I invoked Article 12. Mordecai is being executed. Silas confessed everything." "Silas confessed?" Surprise in her voice. "Why would he?" "Because you inspired him. Because watching you fight through blindness to help me showed him what real courage looks like." Lucian brought her hands to his lips, kissed her knuckles. "I also claimed you as consort, officially, in front of the entire council. I hope that's acceptable." "You hope it's—" Thalia laughed. The sound was bright in the dim room. "You ridiculous vampire. Yes, it's acceptable. It's perfect. The healers are coming. They'll purge the venom. You'll see again." "I don't need to see to know what matters." She reached out, found his face with her hands, traced the shape of it like reading Braille. "You did it. You proved them wrong, proved yourself capable." "We did it, you and I." "Yes," she agreed, "we did." He kissed her then, gentle and fierce at once, a promise and a claim and a future all wrapped into one moment. When they broke apart, footsteps echoed in the corridor, the healers arriving with the medicine that would restore her sight. But in that moment, in that breath between the trial's ending and the future's beginning, Lucian Ashford was exactly where he needed to be. Not on a throne, not wielding power, but kneeling beside a woman who'd seen the worst of him and chosen to stay anyway. Who'd taught him that strength wasn't the absence of weakness. It was the courage to face weakness and overcome it. "I love you," he said, the words he'd whispered when she was unconscious, the truth he'd been too afraid to speak while she could hear it. "I know," Thalia said, her blind eyes somehow still finding his. "I've known since the night you chose to learn instead of hide. I love you too." The healers entered. The ritual of healing began, but Lucian stayed beside her, holding her hand, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it as partners, the way it was always meant to be. Talia's sight returned 3 days after the trial. The healers had worked their ritual, chanted in languages older than memory, drew symbols on her skin with ash and blood. The nightshade venom fought them every step, clung to her eyes like a living thing that didn't want to let go. But on the third morning, when dawnlight touched the mountains, Talia opened her eyes and saw. The first thing she saw was Lucian. He'd stayed beside her bed for 72 hours, had refused to leave even when Raven insisted he needed to rest, had held her hand through every hour of darkness while the healers worked. Now he sat in the chair beside her, head tilted back against the cushion, eyes closed, not sleeping. Vampires didn't sleep like that, just resting in that strange stillness that passed for peace among the undead. "Lucian," she said. Her voice was rough from disuse. His eyes open, blue as winter sky, fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. "You can see me," he said. Not a question. He'd known the moment her vision cleared, had heard it in her heartbeat, in the catch of her breath. "I can see you." She reached up, touched his face, the cool skin, the sharp line of his jaw, features she'd only felt in darkness. "You look exhausted." "I don't get exhausted." "You look it anyway." She tried to sit up. The room spun slightly. He was there immediately, supporting her, arranging pillows behind her back with a gentleness that seemed impossible from hands that could tear stone. "The council wants to meet with you," he said, "formally recognize you as consort. There's ceremony involved, politics. You don't have to do it now. You should rest." "I'm tired of resting." Thalia swung her legs over the side of the bed, stood, swayed. Lucian's hand steadied her. "What happened to Mordecai?" "Final death, executed at dawn the day after the trial." His voice was flat, factual. "Silas was pardoned. The council voted to strip him of his elder status, but allowed him to remain in the territory. He's requested assignment to the border patrols, as far from the castle as possible." "He saved you, saved both of us." "I know. I granted him full pardon and a commendation. He didn't want either, said he didn't deserve forgiveness for doing what he should have done from the beginning." Lucian paused. "I understand that sentiment." Talia looked at him, really looked, saw something different in his bearing. The weight was still there, but lighter now, carried differently. "You passed the trial," she said. "The council accepted you. When will you accept yourself?" "I'm working on it." "Good." She crossed to the window. Outside, autumn was deepening toward winter. The aspens had turned gold. The first snow dusted the high peaks. "How long was I blind?" 6 days total, 3 before the trial, 3 after. 6 days. She pressed her palm against the cold glass. 6 days, and I thought I'd never see again. Thought I'd spend the rest of my life in darkness. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. Lucian moved behind her, close but not touching, giving her space to feel what she needed to feel. "And yet you still helped me prepare," he said. "Still listened while I read. Still corrected my mistakes, even knowing you might never see again. Because that's what partnership means. You don't abandon people when things get hard. You push through." She turned to face him. "Which brings us to the question we've been avoiding." "What question?" "What happens now? You're king. I'm your consort. But I'm human. I'll age. I'll die. And you'll continue for centuries without me." She searched his face. "What exactly are we building here, Lucian?" The silence stretched between them. Outside, a crow called, harsh and lonely. "I don't know," he said finally. "The truth, raw and unadorned. I haven't thought past keeping you alive, keeping you safe. Everything else seemed secondary." "It's not secondary. It's the whole point." Thalia took his hands, cold fingers wrapped around warm ones. "I need to know what you want, not what you think I want to hear, what you actually want." Lucian looked at their joined hands, studied them like they held answers he couldn't find anywhere else. "I want 30 years with you," he said quietly. 40 if we're lucky. I want to wake every night and find you beside me. I want to teach you about vampire history while you teach me human literature. I want to build the school we talked about. Watch it grow. Watch you guide it." He looked up, met her eyes. "And when those 30 or 40 years end, when your heart stops and your breath fails, I want to hold you while it happens. Then I want to continue, for centuries, carrying the memory of you like a light in the darkness." Thalia felt tears on her cheeks, didn't bother wiping them away. "That's the saddest thing anyone has ever said to me. It's the truth. I won't lie to you, not about this." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I could offer you forever, could turn you vampire, give you immortality, but the transformation is dangerous. 15% mortality rate, 3 days of agony, and if you survive, you'd be changed, fundamentally different, no longer human, no longer able to walk in daylight or taste food or feel warmth the way you do now. But we'd have forever. We'd have eternity. Whether that's the same as forever." He shook his head. "I don't know." Eleanor chose to stay human, chose her mortal life over immortality with me. I've spent 50 years wondering if she made the right choice. If what we had was better because it was finite, because every moment was precious in a way immortal moments can never be. Thalia pulled her hands free, walked to the other side of the room, needed distance to think clearly. "You're asking me to choose," she said, "between a mortal life with you that ends too soon, or an immortal life that changes everything I am. I'm not asking you to choose anything. I'm telling you the options. The choice is yours, always yours." "And what would you choose if you were me?" Lucian was quiet for a long moment. "I'd choose life. Whichever version meant actually living instead of just existing. But I'm not you, and I've been a vampire for 340 years. I don't remember what it's like to be human, to feel the sun on my face without pain, to taste wine and bread, to know that time is limited and every moment matters because of that limitation." He moved to stand before her. "Don't choose based on what you think I want. Choose based on what you want, what you need, who you want to be." "I don't know who I want to be." The confession came out raw, broken. "I came here thinking I knew, thinking I just wanted to be valued for my mind, to matter. But now I have that. I have you. I have purpose, and I'm terrified of losing it, of dying in 30 years and leaving all of this behind." "Then don't die. Take the transformation. I'll be with you every second. If something goes wrong, I die anyway, just faster and more painfully." Thalia pressed her hands to her face. "I need time to think, to decide. Can you give me that?" "As much as you need." "Thank you." She lowered her hands, looked at him standing there, patient, loving, willing to wait for however long it took. "I do love you. You know that, right?" "I know." He crossed the distance between them, kissed her forehead. "Take all the time you need. The answer doesn't change what we have right now, in this moment." The nightmares started a week later. Thalia would fall asleep in her human bed, in her human body, and dream of transformation, of blood filling her mouth, of her heart stopping, of 3 days of agony that ended in either death or something that wasn't quite life. She'd wake gasping. Lucian would be there, holding her, whispering that it was just a dream, just fear talking, that she didn't have to choose anything she didn't want. But the dreams persisted, got worse, more vivid. In one, she transformed successfully but couldn't remember who she'd been before. Looked at Lucian with vampire eyes and felt nothing. No love, no recognition, just hunger. In another, she died halfway through, felt her soul leaving, watched Lucian break apart with grief while her body cooled on a table in the castle's deepest chamber. The worst dream came 2 weeks after her sight returned. She transformed successfully, became vampire, had eternity with Lucian. But in the dream 100 years passed, then 200, And slowly, gradually, she lost her humanity, lost the things that made her Thalia, became hard, cold, cruel, a creature who remembered being human the way someone might remember a half-forgotten story. She woke from that dream screaming. Lucian held her while she sobbed, didn't say anything, just held her until the fear passed and exhaustion pulled her back towards sleep. But she saw something in his face, a recognition, a knowing. He'd had the same fear, was still having it. 340 years later. The next day Thalia avoided him, walked the castle grounds alone. The autumn air was cold enough to see her breath. The leaves were falling in golden drifts that crunched under her feet. She found herself in the cemetery. It was a small plot behind the castle, graves for human servants who died in service to the vampire court. Headstones weathered smooth by centuries of mountain wind. One grave was newer than the rest, the stone still sharp-edged, still readable. Eleanor Ashford, beloved consort, 1798 to 1826. She chose love. Thalia stood before the grave for a long time, wondering what Eleanor had felt, what she'd thought during those last moments, whether she regretted her choice to stay human, to die mortal while Lucian continued without her. She was at peace at the end. Thalia turned. Raven stood a few feet away, silent as always. The old vampire moved like smoke given form. "You were there?" Thalia asked. "I was," held her hand while Lucian held the other. The plague took her fast, 3 days from first fever to last breath. Raven looked at the headstone. She told him she didn't regret it, that she'd rather have 28 years of mortal love than eternity of vampire existence, that being human was part of who she was, and losing that would mean losing herself. Did he understand? Eventually, it took him 50 years, but yes, he understood. Raven's dark eyes moved to Thalia. He'd understand if you made the same choice, or the opposite one. He just wants you to choose for yourself, not for him. What would you choose if you were human and loved a vampire? Raven smiled. It was a terrible expression, like looking at a skull that had learned to mimic joy. I'd choose immortality, without hesitation. But I was never human in the ways that matter. Even when I was mortal, I was cold, distant. Transformation just made permanent what was already true. You're saying I'm not like you. I'm saying you love the sun, love food and wine and warmth. Love your humanity in ways I never loved mine. He gestured to the grave. Eleanor was the same. She could have transformed. Lucian offered multiple times. She always said no, not because she didn't love him, because loving him meant staying true to herself, and herself was human. Thalia looked back at the headstone. Did she suffer at the end? Yes, the plague is not kind, but Lucian was with her every moment, read to her from the books she loved, held her when the fever got bad, made sure she died knowing she was loved. Raven paused. If you choose mortality, he'll do the same for you. Be there at the end. Make sure you don't die alone. Then he'll carry your memory for centuries, the way he carries Eleanor's. And if I choose transformation, then you'll have eternity, or you'll die in the attempt. 15% mortality rate is not insignificant. Raven's expression softened slightly. There's no safe choice here, Thalia. Only different risks, different losses, different futures. He left as silently as he'd arrived. Thalia stood alone among the graves. The autumn sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky the colors of fire and blood. She stayed until darkness fell, until the cold drove her back inside, until she knew what she had to do. The blood servants found her the next morning. Anna was the head servant, 50 years old, gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, hands weathered from decades of work. She'd served the castle for 25 years, had seen 6 consorts come and go. 4 had died mortal, 2 had transformed. She knocked on Thalia's door with the firmness of someone who'd earned the right to interrupt. "Lady Corwin, may we speak with you?" Thalia opened the door, found not just Anna but 6 other servants, all human, all women, ages ranging from 20 to 60. "What's this about?" Thalia asked. "We heard you're struggling with the choice," Anna said. No preamble, no dancing around the subject. Mortal or vampire? We wanted to offer perspective. They filed into Thalia's chambers without waiting for invitation, arranged themselves around the room. Anna remained standing. "I've been here 25 years, Anna said. "Came when I was 25, young, stupid, thought serving vampires would be exotic, exciting." She smiled slightly. "Turned out it was mostly normal. Cleaning, cooking, managing household. But I stayed because King Ashford is fair, pays well, treats us like people instead of cattle." "I've been here 8 years, another woman said. Margaret, 30 years old. "My husband died, left me with 2 children and no prospects. The king gave me work, gave my children education. One of them is at university now because of the salary I earn here." One by one they told their stories. Why they'd come, why they'd stayed, what it meant to live in a vampire castle, to serve immortal creatures, to exist in the space between human and something else. "We're telling you this," Anna said, "because you need to understand what you mean to us. You're not just the king's consort. You're the first consort in memory who treats us like equals, who learns our names, asks about our families, teaches us to read during your free time." Thalia blinked. "You noticed that?" "Of course we noticed. Margaret's daughter can read now because of you. Thomas's son is learning Latin. Clara is working through philosophy texts." Anna's voice was fierce. "You're changing lives here, Lady Corwin. Not just King Ashford's. Ours. And if you choose to stay mortal, we'll respect that. But if you choose transformation because you're afraid of losing your humanity, know that your humanity isn't in your heartbeat. It's in how you treat people, how you care. That doesn't change just because you become vampire." "The 2 consorts who transformed," Margaret added. "One became cruel, cold, but she was cruel before transformation. The magic just made permanent what was already there. The other became kinder, more compassionate, because she was kind before and had eternity to express it." "Transformation doesn't create who you are," Anna said. "It reveals it, amplifies it. If you're good now, you'll be good then. If you're human in the ways that matter now, you'll be human in those ways forever." Thalia felt tears on her face again. Seemed like all she did lately was cry. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Scared of dying, scared of transforming, scared of making the wrong choice." "Fear is sensible," Anna said. "You'd be stupid not to be scared. But don't let fear choose for you. Choose what you want, what matters to you. Then deal with the fear afterward." The women stayed another hour, told stories, shared tea, made Thalia laugh with tales of castle mishaps and vampire peculiarities, reminded her that life, in whatever form, was meant to be lived, not just endured. When they left, Thalia felt lighter, clearer. She knew what she wanted. She found Lucian in the library that night. He was reading one of the ancient grimoires, moving through the text with the careful precision of someone still learning, still growing, still becoming something he'd never been before. "Lucian," he looked up, set the book aside, gave her his complete attention the way he always did, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "I've made my choice," Thalia said. She saw him tense, saw fear cross his face. Not fear of her answer, fear that whatever she chose would hurt her, would cost her something she couldn't afford to lose. "I want the transformation," she said. "I want forever with you. I want to build the school and watch it grow for centuries. I want to see what we can accomplish with eternity instead of just decades." She crossed the room, took his hands. "But more than that, I want to choose this. Choose you. Choose us. Not because I'm afraid of dying, because I'm excited about living." Lucian pulled her close, held her so tight she could barely breathe. Are you certain? No, I'm terrified, but I'm certain enough. She pulled back to look at him. The servants told me something today. They said transformation reveals who you are, amplifies it. And I've spent my whole life trying to be true to myself, trying to be honest and kind and useful. I don't think becoming vampire changes that. I think it gives me more time to be those things. The risk is 15%, which means 85% chance of success. I'll take those odds. She smiled. Besides, I'm stubborn. Death will have to work harder than average to claim me. Despite everything, Lucian laughed. You are impossibly stubborn. It's one of my favorite things about you. Good, because you're getting centuries of it. She touched his face. When do we do this? Whenever you're ready. There's ritual involved. Preparation. I'll need to drain enough blood to bring you to the edge of death, then replace it with my own. You'll drink from me while I hold you. The process takes 3 days. You'll be in agony most of that time. I'll stay with you every second. I know you will. She kissed him, soft and sure. Tomorrow night. Let's do it tomorrow night, before I lose my nerve. Tomorrow night, he agreed. They spent that night in each other's arms, not planning, not preparing, just being, talking until dawn about everything and nothing, the life they'd build, the changes they'd make, the future that stretched bright and impossible ahead of them. When the sun rose, Thalia looked at it through the window, felt its warmth on her face for what might be the last time. I'll miss this, she said. The sun, I'll miss it. I know, I miss it too, every day for 340 years. Lucian stood behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. But we'll have the moon, the stars, the night. We'll build a life in darkness that's brighter than any day. Promise me something, Thalia said. Anything. If something goes wrong, if I don't make it, don't spend the next 3 centuries blaming yourself. Don't lock yourself away like you did after Eleanor. Live. Build the school anyway. Make the changes anyway. Honor what we had by continuing it. Thalia, promise me. His arms tightened. I promise. She turned in his embrace, kissed him one more time as a human woman, mortal, warm, finite. I love you, she said. I love you too. The transformation began at midnight. They'd chosen the deepest chamber in the castle. Stone walls thick enough to muffle screaming. No windows. No light except torches that burned with chemical steadiness. Raven was there. Anna, the castle's healer, an ancient vampire named Corvus, who'd performed this ritual 100 times over 6 centuries. Thalia lay on a stone table. The surface was cold against her back. She wore a simple white shift. Her hair was unbound. Lucian stood beside her. He'd removed his coat, rolled his sleeves to the elbow. His face was pale, even for a vampire. Controlled, but she could see the fear underneath. Last chance, he said quietly. We can stop this. You can walk out of here and live your mortal life. No judgment, no regret. I'm not walking anywhere, Thalia said, except toward forever with you. Lucian leaned down, kissed her forehead. This will hurt. I know. He bit his own wrist first, deep. Blood welled up, black in the torchlight. He held it over a silver chalice. Let it drain until the cup was half full. Then he came to her. I'm sorry, he whispered. Then he bent to her throat. The bite was agony. She'd expected pain, had prepared herself for it. But nothing could have prepared her for this. It felt like being torn apart from the inside, like every cell in her body was screaming. Lucian drank, slow and measured, draining her blood with the precision of a surgeon. She could feel her heart struggling, feel her body fighting to stay alive while he emptied it. The world started to fade, gray at the edges, growing darker. Now, Corvus said. Lucian pulled back, brought the chalice to her lips. Drink. She drank. His blood was cold, thick, tasted like metal in winter, in death. It burned going down, burned in her stomach, burned through her veins like liquid fire. Then the real pain began. Her body rejected it, fought it, every human cell trying to expel the vampire blood that was replacing what she'd lost. The convulsions started, violent enough that Raven and Anna had to hold her down. Through it all, Lucian held her hand, whispered to her, reminded her to breathe, to fight, to hold on. The first day was the worst. The transformation started in her heart, the muscle adapting to circulate blood it no longer produced, changing its rhythm, slowing, nearly stopping before finding a new cadence. Inhuman. Wrong. She screamed until her voice gave out. Then she screamed silently, mouth open, no sound, just endless agony. Lucian read to her, ancient texts, modern stories, anything to give her something to focus on besides pain. His voice was steady, unwavering, an anchor in the chaos. The second day, the changes moved outward. Her bones reshaped themselves, became denser, harder, strong enough to support vampire strength. Every bone in her body breaking and healing and breaking again. Her muscles tore, regrew, adapted to supernatural power. Her senses sharpened until the torchlight was blinding, until Anna's heartbeat sounded like thunder, until the stone beneath her smelled like centuries of death and time. Through it all, consciousness came and went. She'd wake to pain, pass out from pain, wake again to find Lucian still there, still holding her hand, still reading in that steady voice. The third day, her heart stopped. It happened at 2 a.m. Corvus had warned them it would. The final stage of transformation, the human heart giving its last beat, making room for the vampire heart to take over. But Thalia's heart stopped and didn't restart. Lucian felt it, the stillness, the absence where her pulse had been. "No," his voice cracked. "No, come back. Thalia, come back." Corvus checked her vitals, shook his head. "She's gone. The transformation failed. I'm sorry." "She's not gone." Lucian bent over her. "She can't be gone. Talia, please." Anna was crying. Raven's face was stone. Corvus began preparing the ritual for respectful disposal. But Lucian didn't move, didn't accept it, just held Talia's hand and whispered, "You promise me forever. You don't break promises. Come back, please. I need you. I love you. Come back." Silence, stone and shadow and death. Then, a breath, small, shallow. Talia's chest rose, fell. Her heart beat, once, twice, finding its new rhythm. Her eyes opened, red, vampire red. She gasped, Lucian's name on her lips. "I'm here," he said, crying, actually crying. "I'm here. You made it. You're alive." "Everything," she whispered. Her voice was different, stronger. "I can hear everything, smell everything, see everything. Your senses are adjusting. It will settle." Lucian helped her sit up. She moved with new strength, new grace. "How do you feel?" "Like I died and came back as something else." She looked at her hands, pale now, cold, vampire hands. "Did I die?" "For 30 seconds, then you came back." "Good," she smiled. Fangs showed. "I wasn't done living yet." 6 months passed in a blur of adjustment and discovery. Thalia learned her new body, the strength that could crush stone without effort, the speed that could cross the castle grounds in seconds, the hunger that rose like a tide and demanded blood. Lucian taught her control, how to feed without killing, how to move among humans without frightening them, how to exist as something other than human while still honoring the humanity that made her who she was. She took to it faster than he'd expected, but then she'd always been a quick study. On a cold December night, 6 months after her transformation, they held the blood oath ceremony in the castle's great hall. Every vampire in the territory attended. Blood servants stood along the walls, witnesses to history. Lucian wore black, formal, ancient. Talia wore crimson, a dress that had belonged to Eleanor. Anna had found it in storage, had cried when Thalia asked if she could wear it. The ritual was simple. They cut their palms, mixed their blood, drank from the same chalice while speaking oaths that predated written language. When it was done, Raven stepped forward with a proclamation. By the ancient rites and modern laws, Lucian Ashford and Thalia Corwin are bound, king and queen, partners in eternity. The hall erupted in applause. The academy opened its doors the following spring. A building constructed specifically for learning, classrooms, library, dormitories for students who came from far away. The mission was radical. Vampires and humans learning side by side. No separation, no hierarchy, just knowledge shared freely among anyone willing to learn. The first class had 12 students, 6 vampire, 6 human, ages ranging from 16 to 60. Thalia taught languages, Latin, Greek, vampire runic script. Lucian taught history, both vampire and human, showing how the two intertwined. Raven taught philosophy. Anna taught practical magic. Corvus taught medicine. By the end of the first year, they had 40 students. By the 5th year, 200. By the 10th year, the academy was famous throughout the territory. Students came from other vampire kingdoms, from human cities, from places that had never imagined such cooperation was possible. They adopted their first child in year 15, a human girl orphaned by plague. Thalia raised her, taught her, watched her grow and marry and have children of her own, held her hand when she died at 73. It broke something in Thalia, the loss, but it also taught her something vital, that love was worth the pain, that caring for someone mortal didn't diminish the love, it enhanced it. Over the next century, they adopted 5 more children. 2 they transformed when they reached adulthood and chose immortality. 3 lived mortal lives and died surrounded by vampire family who mourned them genuinely. Anna died peacefully 20 years into the academy's existence, surrounded by family. Thalia and Lucian had been there, had held her hand at the end, had mourned her genuinely. But her legacy continued. Her children and grandchildren worked at the academy, taught, learned, carried forward her belief that knowledge was meant to be shared. 150 years after the transformation, on a Tuesday in autumn, Thalia stood in front of a classroom teaching ancient languages to 50 students. The year was 2026. The world had changed beyond recognition. Cars, computers, technologies that would have seemed like magic to the people of 1876. But the academy remained, adapted, evolved, but remained. Thalia wore modern clothes now, jeans, a sweater, things that would have scandalized her great-grandmother. But time moved on. Today we're studying the connection between Sumerian cuneiform and early vampire runic script, she said. Her voice carried easily across the room. 150 years of practice. Open your text to chapter 7. The door opened. Lucian slipped in, moved to the back of the classroom, leaned against the wall with that same casual grace he'd had when she first met him. 180 years hadn't changed him. He looked exactly as he had that first night, but he was different in the ways that mattered. More open, more willing to be seen, more at peace with himself. When the class ended and the students filed out, Lucian approached. "Good class?" he asked. "Excellent class. We had a breakthrough on the connection between Proto-Elamite and the Northern Vampire dialect." Thalia gathered her materials. "What brings you here?" "I wanted to watch you teach," he smiled. "I never get tired of it. Seeing you share knowledge, seeing students learn, knowing we built this. We did, didn't we?" Talia looked around the classroom, modern, bright, full of potential. "Sometimes I still can't believe it, that this is real, that we made it happen." "Do you regret it? The transformation?" It was a question he asked every few decades, always worried, always needing reassurance. Never, Talia said. The truth, simple and complete. I miss the sun sometimes, miss food, miss certain things about being human, but I wouldn't trade this. What we've built, what we've become, the students we've taught, the lives we've changed. She took his hand. I wouldn't trade you. I love you, Lucian said. After 150 years, the words still mattered. I love you too. They walked through the academy, past classrooms full of learning, past the library where students studied ancient and modern texts side by side, past the garden where Anna's granddaughter taught herbology. In their private chambers, Thalia found the photograph she kept on her desk. Herself and Lucian and their 6 adopted children. The 2 vampire children looking exactly as they had 50 years ago. The 4 human children aged now, gray-haired, but alive, visiting when they could. I've been thinking, Lucian said. He sat in his favorite chair. About the next phase, what the academy becomes in the next century. Already planning? We have eternity, might as well use it, he smiled. I want to expand, establish satellite schools, share what we've learned with other territories, make this model standard instead of exceptional. That's ambitious. We've had 150 years of success, time to scale it. Thalia sat beside him, curled into his side the way she had that first night in the library, when he was learning to read and she was learning to hope. Tell me something, Lucian said. If you could go back, knowing everything you know now, would you still choose transformation? Talia didn't hesitate. Yes, every time, in every universe, I'd choose you, choose this, choose forever. Even knowing what it costs? Especially knowing what it costs. The cost is what makes it valuable. Love that requires sacrifice. Partnership that demands growth. Eternity that's earned instead of given. She kissed him. That's worth everything. Outside, the sun was setting. Talia couldn't see it, couldn't feel its warmth, but she could see the way it painted the sky through the windows, could appreciate its beauty even if she couldn't experience it directly. They sat as darkness fell, as the academy quieted for the night, as one more day passed in an existence measured in centuries. Lucian picked up a book from the side table, one of the folk tales they'd read together 150 years ago. Read to me? Talia asked. Always. His voice filled the room, steady, confident, reading words that had once been impossible, words that had changed everything. And Thalia listened, eyes closed, head on his shoulder, exactly where she needed to be. Not ruling, not hiding, not pretending, just being, with him, in the life they'd built from honesty and courage and the fierce determination of 2 people who'd found each other against impossible odds and refused to let go. Forever wasn't a guarantee. It was a choice made new each night, and they chose it, would keep choosing it, for as long as eternity lasted.